everyone. Welcome back to Night in My City Unite. I'm Charmaine James, and today's video we will be discussing gaining generational wealth through financial freedom. I have with me Pastor Seth and Pastor Meredith. I'm going to get them to introduce themselves to you so you'll know what their titles and roles here at One City Church and what they do not only for One City Church but for our region and our nation. Pastor Meredith?
I'm Pastor Meredith. I've been attending this church for quite a few years now. Grew up going to school in the area. Grew up, and then when Seth and I got married, started attending church here, and then came on staff shortly after that.
We've been focusing on spearheading a ministry here called Financial Wellness. We started off as the youth pastors, or junior high youth pastors here, right before we got married. Yep. We were engaged, and working with junior high students really gave us a heart for this next generation coming up behind us. One of the things that we saw that was really needed in that generation was discipleship when it comes to finances, because finances are a really good tell of how well we're engaging with life. They show real well if we're doing things that are bettering our life. They show if we're being diligent and focused, and when we're not any of those things, our finances very quickly show how chaotic life can be. So we spearheaded that ministry by starting to teach the Dave Ramsey
Financial Peace University. And through that, we really just felt the Lord leading us into a new area of ministry, something that hasn't really been done before, but just a holistic approach to how we treat finances. So not just what to do, how to save money, but really how to shift your mindset.
Yes.
From, okay, well, money is just a part of life. It's just, going to take me one way or the other, but, not being controlled by your money, but telling your money what to do.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. Controlling where it goes, where every dollar goes, and you're really in charge of your own life, and kind of encouraging people to see that and take hold of that.
I like what you said, telling your money what to do. And I like when we go on our website for One City Church, I was reading through your ministry page, and I like this quote that you have on here. When we are in a position to thrive, we're in a position to influence. So to thrive and influence, you have to tell your money what to do. And if your mindset is off or unbalanced or not stable, your money is pretty much telling you what to do. Or I like what the word says, that the devourer will take your money. I'm just paraphrasing it. But sometimes we devour our money on how we just spend, and not save, or not even look towards the next generation or our kids, or what we can leave behind to our kids. So I think this ministry is key. And I like that you started with the junior high, because I can't remember in junior high anyone discussing finances with me. I knew I needed to tithe. My parents told me that with church. But after that, I just blow my money on whatever I want to blow it on. If it's clothes, snacks, games, just blow your money. So, and can you go back and think on when you were discussing finances with the junior high students? Why don't you share with the viewers how they can discuss it with their children?
So our approach when it came to the junior high, with anything, especially with the finances, we were there to plant seeds. We had very little intention of seeing that fruit, because that's such a short time in their life. When people talk to me about what success was or what success in our ministry would be, I say, I want to meet these junior hires when they're 30 years old and that they're successful in life at that time. If God chooses to move in a different way right now and we see fruit from that, then that's fine, but we're here to plant seeds.
And I like what the word says in Proverbs 13:22, that's on your page as well. A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. So not just to his children's, but his children's children. But the wealth of the sinner is stored up for the righteous. Let's talk about the wealth of the sinner, what that word means on that. I know you can give me that, Pastor Seth. The wealth of the sinner is stored up for the righteous.
So everything we teach, we find in Scripture. and then we use a thread to weave through that and pull it all together and it be able to make sense for some people. So when it comes to the wealth of the sinner, we're talking in biblical terminology. We're talking about in God's perspective that all wealth is God's. And so a sinner can have wealth because they exist in this world, in this earth, but God can do what he wants with it. And so we've seen even in our own life where somebody who was not a believer have their wealth, unbeknownst to them. Now, I'm not talking about they woke up one day and the bank account was drained, but unbeknownst to them, their wealth was transferred from them to the righteous. I saw that through a sale of a vehicle that we had one time, that this individual purchasing the vehicle, and they were a multimillionaire. This was going to be a little fun motorcycle for them. They had all their other expensive bikes, but they wanted to buy this one to put around town on, I guess. They bought this motorcycle not knowing that we had already agreed to take the funds from that and sow into a ministry of our friend. And so that's what we're talking about, where wealth can just transfer and the sinner doesn't know exactly what's going on. And so, but God is looking for good stewards, is a word we use in life and in church. He's looking for good stewards, and he's looking for a place where that wealth can multiply. And that's where we get that word thrive from. It's something that is reproducing in a manner that is benefiting others around it, not just itself.
Okay, and if I'm not in church and I want to use the same principles, how would that work?
So we live in a cause and effect world. So everything you sow, you reap. And so the principles, just as much as if you're not in the church, the sun comes up every day. These principles they ring true all day long because it's the way God inspired it to be. It's the way he created it. And so they're going to work. They're going to work. Now, you may not see the longevity because you're not giving the credence to the Creator if you're not a believer. But the principle itself will work. And many, I've talked to people who are not in the church, and they understand that if you're going to get, you got to give first. And that's just the way it works. If you're going to reap, you have to sow something.
That's it. Let's dig deep into financial wellness or financial freedom. I like the word freedom. Let's dig deep into the principles of beginning to end. So if I'm new to this, I don't know anything about financial wellness program, how would I start if I'm interested?
Well, one really good way is just come meet us, say hello, introduce yourself. We like to talk and get to know you a little bit, but we do offer a coaching program as well as the classes that we offer. Like Pastor Seth said, we did teach Financial Peace University for a number of years before we shifted into kind of our own curriculum that we have, put together. So that's one way, come meet us, come sit in on one of our classes, give us a call, an email. You can sign up for a coaching session, go from there.
And if I'm not a member here and I'm just from another nation, another state, how do I get connected with financial wellness?
So we teach, a lot of what we teach is Dave Ramsey's curriculum. By and large, the majority of it is. A lot of his principles and tools are what we teach. And so if you're not able to get connected here, you can still get connected with the resources that we use through his website and all of he's got so many free tools out there for anybody to go use. But, we're here accessible by email. We're here accessible, of course, through our website and then by phone. And if anybody wants to take the time to reach out, we'll take the time to listen and look at their unique situation, which is why we call it the financial wellness. When you're growing up and you're a child, you go to the doctor not because you're ill, but you go to have a well check.
Yes.
And they look at, are you progressing the way you should be?
That's good.
Are you meeting the quote unquote mile markers? What do we need to do to improve your situation? And it's a unique looking glass into that child's situation. So that's why it's the financial wellness here at One City Church, because we sit down with people who are making six figures that don't know how to do a budget.
Wow.
And then we sit down with people who maybe they know how to do a budget, but they're making $20,000 a year with children at home.
Yes.
And so we have to be able to change approaches, same tools, but how do we apply the tools here?
Well, you're changing my mind on the wellness now because, I like freedom because we've heard, years and years on financial freedom and being free from debt. So I like the wellness of how you're saying going to get a wellness check. Everybody can understand and agree and come into a fullness of understanding that the body needs to be well, but the finance needs to be well too. Let's talk about some baby steps that can help us gain financial wellness.
Okay, so some of the baby steps that we teach, obviously, are Dave Ramsey's baby steps. Baby step number 1 is save $1,000 for a starter emergency fund. That number 1 by far is the number 1 goal. It'll help kind of buffer you from a lot of what life is going to throw at you. Number 2 after that is start your debt snowball. So
Explain debt snowball.
So the debt snowball is a Dave Ramsey concept. It teaches to list all of your debts except for your mortgage,
Wow.
smallest to largest.
Yeah.
And the theory behind that is that whenever you start with the very smallest debt, you start to gain momentum. So
I like that.
you pay off one debt as fast as you can, and you're like, oh man, I did one. So then it encourages you to step to the second one. And as you continue to go, you gain the money that you started throwing behind the small debt to then all the way to your largest debt. So you're throwing a huge snowball, if you will, kind of rolling down a hill. So you have momentum, you have motivation. So then by the end of your debt snowball, you are ready, you're motivated, you're feeling good, you're almost to the finish line. So it just kind of keeps you going and keeps you encouraged so that you don't get hung up on paying a long loan over a long period of time with high interest. You can kind of get bogged down and discouraged, I feel like, by that.
Almost definitely. If you're looking, especially young adults that went to college and they had to pay for their own way to school and then get loans, that's a lot.
Yeah, it definitely
And then when
is.
you're starting over and you just get your job that you've been working for and going to school for, and then you're looking at all this debt. So I do like that. Let's talk about and get in deeper as well as coaching sessions when you need a little one-on-one, because I can look, I'm going to speak on behalf of some people that can just look at all their debt and just be like, this is overwhelming. And, you hear on the news or hear anywhere else somebody that just worked out their debt in a year. And is that true? Can that really happen? Or 6 months or 5 months? So talk to us about some coaching sessions, not using the names, of course, that had success stories.
So anyone who is willing and able, they will succeed. Absolutely. So the majority of what we deal with is breaking a mindset of when it comes how to approach these things. A lot of people have a misunderstanding of what it is to be a millionaire, so they don't even want to pursue wealth that direction. So why am I going to get out of debt? I'm always going to have student loans. How many times have we ever heard that?
Yes.
I'm always going to have a car payment. How many times have we heard that? And so you go through life hearing all of this. You got to have a good credit score.
Yes.
Well, we're there to give counter information.
That's good.
To say, okay, why do you need a credit score? And typically the response is, well, so that I can borrow money. Okay, how do you get a credit score? Well, I borrow money and I pay it back. So the only way to interact with a credit score is to borrow money and pay it back. Therefore, the higher the credit score you have, the more money you've borrowed, and now you've paid back. In American culture, especially in today's consumer mind culture, there's a lot of mindsets that we have to go and give counter information to weigh it out and balance it so that you're not just blindly going through the system of credit scores, student loans.
That's good.
And all those things. So all those coaching sessions, they revolve around breaking those mindsets.
Okay.
Again, especially when you sit down with people making 6 figures and they've never made a budget in their life and they just spend because there's something to buy around every corner, right? There's advertisements on every television channel of what you can spend your money on, and we do all day long. So trying to get people to understand to pull a section of that money and set it aside for tomorrow is hard.
Yeah.
It's
hard because they think they need all of it to make it through today.
We also like to look at the behaviors behind the actions. So a lot of times you'll sit down with a couple who's married, and there'll be some conflict there. And what's the root behind that? Okay, so one person is wanting to save more, one person is wanting to spend more. Well, is there a communication issue? Is there underlying resentment about an issue? So we really like to look at the heart and what's going on underneath.
Yes.
So kind of what's triggering the behavior, And then you'll see other people who are just fearful, fearful of the future, fearful of, what's going to happen, not having enough, all kinds of different things. So it's a little bit of psychology, a little bit of Holy Spirit, a lot of looking at the heart and just kind of getting it all out on the table. So
I like what you both are saying, but I like how you just said some people don't want to look to the future. And then what you said, Pastor Seth, that is advertisements everywhere. So you live only once. So you just want to shop. You just want to get your stuff. You're not even worried about the future when you turn 70, 80, because we're living longer. And so you're not even worried about that. And that is why now we have a generation of baby boomers that's still working constantly at age, over 60, 70, 80, still working because didn't save. And so I'm hoping somebody today is getting help on how to think about the future, to save, not only just for themselves, but for the next generation. And so since I went into the next generation, let's talk about how you teach about generational wealth. And what is generational wealth first? And how do you help prepare your clients to create generational wealth? So what is generational wealth if I don't know?
So generational wealth is really a mindset more than it is a number. We think about wealth in terms of bank accounts, investment, riches, assets, all those things. But if you can hand off a correct mindset to the next generation following you, your children and your children's children, to teach them to engage well, because we all know that wealth is fleeting when it comes to money.
Yes.
So I can hand off money to the next generation, yes. But if I don't teach them how to manage it, with the concept of we're managing it for somebody, if we look at our personal finances and pretend that we hired ourselves to manage them, most of us would fire us pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Because we would look at that and go, no, you knew what to do, you didn't do it, you could have done this better, you should have done this, and you didn't do any of that. And so taking any generation, wherever you're at, whether you've inherited a bunch of money or whether you've inherited a bunch of just bad practices when it came to money, taking it and understanding you have to come up with the reason why this is important to you.
Yes.
Then you're going to, once you grasp hold of that, so we can never have that why ripped out of our hands once we grasp hold of it. So we've grabbed hold of why, and our children will understand and respect that too. And we'll hand that off and those tools that go with it to those generations. And if money goes with it, then they'll manage it well. But if money doesn't go with it, the money that they do get in their own life, in their own endeavors, they'll be wealthy because of the way they interacted with it. So
I think it's important, that the reason behind generational wealth is concepts such as diligence and honor and respect. I think a lot of that ties in not just with investing your money well, which is very important, but how you treat others and how you present yourself. I think that's a big part of it. And some of it may have been lost, coming up through the generations, but I think that's important to impart back to our children in a society where it's instant gratification all of the time. You don't have any delay in pleasure. You don't have anything to work for to attain. I think that's really important to kind of roll back and say, okay, we've lived this way for so long, but it's not really doing us any favors.
Okay, let me flip the script real quick. What if I'm poor? I'm living in poverty. I don't have family, and you're talking about generational wealth. Or I'm single, because I'm single. I don't have kids, and you're talking about generational wealth. How do you approach those situations, or those class or group of people?
I think it's really important, like Pastor Seth was saying, to find your why, you know? And so just because you don't have, what a typical family, married with kids, all that, you can still find what the Lord is calling you to. So the Lord may be calling you to save money, to invest money so that you can bless others and be outrageously generous, which is really the root and the base for everything that we teach. We want people to be outrageously generous.
Yes.
We truly believe that Scripture talks about funding the church through being diligent, through being wise, and the Lord will really bless that, But I think that a lot of teachings in Scripture have maybe been overlooked or maybe misinterpreted in different ways. One of the things that I always kind of go back to is when it talks about the apostles after Christ has ascended into heaven. They took care of each other. They sold all that they had, but they didn't just suddenly become homeless.
No.
They took care of each other. They still had streams of income to be able to support themselves and to support those who were in need. And I think it's really important to put the focus back on that. What are we doing as a church and as Christians? Are we helping to support single mothers, widows, the sick, those who are homebound and destitute? Like, where is their support? Are we relying on, public funding for that? Or
Yes.
are we relying on the church and what Christ has called us to do? So I just think that's really important, to really just pray and seek the Lord for what he would have you do. And, it could be, you could leave millions of dollars to people who, wouldn't otherwise be affected.
Yeah, my favorite part in Scripture when you begin to read in the book of Hebrews, it talks about the heroes in the faith. And they didn't even get to see the inheritance, but because they believed in it so much and understood what they were about, that it was given to them. You have Abraham, who got a promise of having a child long before he even had a child, and he only had the one.
Yeah.
And so any individual can grab a hold of the promise. They can look at it through the generational lens, because that's the correct way to look at it. You talked about on our website the phrase that stood out to you about thriving. And where that comes from is in Jeremiah 17, verses 7 and 8. It says, "Blessed is the man whose trust is the Lord,"
Yeah.
or who trusts in the Lord, and whose trust is the Lord. And it says, "For he will be like a tree planted by the water that extends its roots by a stream, and does not fear when the heat comes, but its leaves will be green, and it will not be anxious in a year of drought, nor cease to yield fruit." And so that thriving is when you position yourself and posture yourself, and you use these tools wherever you are,
A believer or a non-believer.
believer or non-believer, you will begin to thrive, and generations will benefit from you. When a tree grows and produces fruit, it doesn't produce it for itself, it produces it for what's around it.
Yeah.
And so that's how anybody can engage with generational wealth.
Okay, how do people deal with financial stress? So we're going to go from generational wealth to what you're dealing with now.
How they
Because
should.
how do you deal with it? Also, people just dealing financially with a lot of different things because of COVID. And I know Seth is saying should because he want to fix the problem.
Yes.
But we have people right now that can't even see beyond the problem. And so we're talking about, generational wealth, but I'm financially stressed now. So help me now. We're now instant gratification type of people. So how would you talk to someone that's dealing with financial stress now? And of course, Pastor Seth, how should they deal with financial stress?
One of the principles that we picked up from Dave Ramsey's team was all about the 4 walls. So right away, you got to protect your 4 walls, and that is housing, food, clothing, and utilities, I think.
Anything that has to do with your full
Yeah, anything that has to do with your immediate surroundings. So first and foremost, you got to eat.
Yeah.
You have to have a place to stay.
Yeah.
So if you're facing heavy stress, if you aren't sure what to do that first. Make sure that your food is covered. Make sure that your home is covered. And if you're looking at losing those things, you got to figure out really quick, what's plan B? So find a church to go to, find a food bank, if you're short on groceries that month. You got to really look to the community and say, okay, I'm struggling. Don't be afraid to ask for help. A lot of people, I think, get hung up on the shame of that, but it's okay. It's not a place of weakness to ask for help.
Yeah.
I think, it's okay to ask for help sometimes. And then once you receive that help, you get back on your feet, help others. And I think, people get kind of stuck, like, oh, well, I just had the help the one time. But you got to turn around and take what you've been handed and then pass it back.
Yeah,
and I think that goes to the mindset, too, of generational wealth. If you're in financial stress, seek help and then turn around and pull others up with you.
Yeah. And how would you talk to a homeless person? Because we have a lot of stories, and our homeless community is growing rapidly across the nation. I would say across the world. And so what would you say? Because some people was working before.
Right.
And now because of COVID, they're homeless. So how would you help them if you would have, a homeless man or woman come in, especially single, but majority of them have families living in cars or just living in tents. How would you help them with financial stress?
Well, that's a very complex situation, yes. There's possibly a lot of things that contributed to that, maybe just one. Most people do live paycheck to paycheck, unfortunately. If we took that phone call, and that was the situation, we would begin to go into survival mode with them, because that's where they are. You have to treat it not quite so desperate, because it is a survival situation, but you need to reach out to whatever your support group is, coworkers, family, and not be too proud to reach out to shelters, homeless shelters, because you don't know what resources are out there until you begin to ask questions. If I found myself in that situation, I wouldn't know what the resources were, but I would get on the phone and start going down the list of what are the resources out there for this exact scenario that I'm finding myself in.
Yes.
Get a little bit of stability. If that's your car, find a good place where you can park and not get run off.
Yes.
Again, that church, but start reaching out to people and begin to put it back together and begin to work a system to climb out. So even as complex as it may get, if you apply the tools, and we're not talking about you're just going to go from your car to back into a house as fast as you went from the house to the car, but what you want to make sure you do is as you're transitioning back into a more normal situation, that you fortify and you do things like we began to talk with the baby steps earlier of keeping an emergency fund or a starter emergency fund,
Yes.
of getting out of debt and getting that wolf, if you will, a little bit further from the door.
That's good.
So that we don't
That's
just
good.
do that, well, we didn't get paid this one time and now we're on the street.
You have to have a little bit of grit to kind of get through it, You just have to keep on, keep asking. If you get a no, ask again. Keep pushing through. Don't give up. Don't just say, well, I'm just going to, this is just what life has handed me right now.
Yes.
I think it's important. One of the things that I think is important that we do is we really seek to help people understand that you don't have to be a victim of your circumstance. Yes, this happened to you. Yes, it's terrible. Yes, it is maybe the hardest thing that you've ever walked through, but you don't have to be a victim to that. You can look up and say, okay, I'm going to overcome this. I can overcome this. I'm going to walk this way out and just keep forward. Keep your head up. Keep looking where you're going. Don't look to the right or the left. Just stay on your path.
Well, this seemed like a great place to stop. Pastor Seth and Pastor Meredith will pick back up again on gaining generational wealth and financial freedom on our next episode of Night in My City Unite.